Hey everyone, I'm Jesse from The Movement Athlete, and today we'll be talking about some common errors and faults that people make when training the planche and how to correct them. So typically we see about 6 different main faults that people do. Of course, there are many more than that, but they often come down to incorrect shaping, maybe an incorrect hand position, or neglecting certain areas of the body. So if you are frustrated and you can't get that plan, check out this video because we'll dive into common faults that we see, why we see them, and how to correct them. So check out the faults coming up next. So why can't you do the planche, right? You might be frustrated after months or years of training this and you still don't have the planche, but it generally comes down to some kind of weakness or incorrect technique. So the first thing we'll eventually dive into is not spending enough time under tension in the planche, because your shoulders need some kind of enough stimulus to have strength gains in the planche. Another one is hand placement, because there are different variations and some might be unlocking something you're not thinking of. We've got the retracted shoulders, which you do not want to be doing. Poor technique from previous progressions, or even going back as far as the plank position with straight arms and just performing that incorrectly. Training with bent arms is a common error that we see. And then lastly, ignoring the core. So we'll touch upon various weaknesses that you might be having, or faults and things that you're neglecting in your planche training. So we'll dive into that next. The first major fault that we see when training the planche is not spending enough time under tension in the planche. So let's take a look at what this might be. And it's simply just kind of jumping in and falling out of it, right? Just falling out too soon, right? Not leaning forwards enough, or not finding the balance point and just coming out of it, right? So you can see Jeremy is just not in the position long enough. And this happens because maybe we like to rush things and we're trying a progression that's too difficult for us. We're just trying to get to the end position of the planche. It could also be a lack of awareness of how to train it, but how to correct it would be to simply hold positions for a longer period of time, because your muscles need to be under a stimulus long enough for these strength gains, and that will optimize your muscular growth and strength. So holding different positions, maybe it's a plank, maybe it's a preceding progression of the planche, but holding it longer. So another common fault that we see in planche training is in regard to hand placement. So you need to find what works for you, of course, but in the planche with the hands facing forwards versus to the side, we'll feel a few different muscles being engaged here. So if Jeremy were to simply turn his hands out to the side, he's going to externally rotate the shoulders, which is in this direction. And by doing so, he's going to be engaging the lats more as well. So again, if you're engaging more muscles, you help spreading the load and making this planche an easier skill to do. So hand placement, turning them slightly out to the side, kind of like involving some torque into the floor, engaging those upper body muscles, and then getting into the planche from here. So try turning your hands out to the side in a planche and see how that works for you. Another common fault that we see in planche training are retracted shoulders. So Jeremy's going to show us what this looks like in a straddle planche, and you'll see that his scapula are kind of pinching together and they're retracted, which is what we don't want in this. So let's go ahead and look at what we do want, just so you can see the difference, right? There's more of a rounding and a protraction of the shoulders. You can see there's a difference in the scapula there. So the way to fix this would be to simply go back to something as simple as a plank and just make sure that you're understanding how to engage those muscles and push, and that in turn will help you train the planche in the right position and avoid these retracted shoulders. And this happens because it's just a natural sinking, because you have to push so hard on the floor, your shoulders just naturally give in if you're not actively pushing down into them. So retracted shoulders is the fault, and you want to make sure they're actually protracted the other way. Another common fault that we see with planches is simply having poor positioning from previous progressions. So if you're doing the straight planche, maybe it's going back to the straddle or the tuck, or even as far back as a straight arm plank on the floor and push up. So if you have these positional errors and you never identify them, address them, and fix them, they carry all the way throughout to the planche, and that's a big error that you don't want to be doing. So let's just check out how a plank can look wrong, right? Push-ups, to put it simply, push-ups can actually be difficult to do well. So we can do a variety of errors. Maybe the head is ducked downward in the plank position. So if he's doing push-ups this way, if he's doing a straddle planche this way. Yep. And then another one could be the retracted shoulders, of he's just never really aware of the shoulder positioning. Maybe his shoulders are good, but his lower back and his core are sagging, and he's got an arch, right? And he's just not aware, and he's continuously doing all these progressions like that. Maybe he's not locking out all the way in the push-up, so I can do some push-ups where he's just not finishing the whole range, and that's fine. So really the point is, it's very easy to see a lot of poor technique in previous progressions. If it's the straddle planche, these things could arrive, right? I commonly see an arch in there, or the retracted shoulders. And then again, if you keep advancing on to the next one, you're never really optimizing your strength gains or the aesthetics of the planche. So go back and correct each, I guess in this point regression, go back far enough and fix them, be pedantic about it, and just fix it right from the start. An extremely common fault that we see with training the planche is doing so with bent arms. So let's see what this looks like. And so instead of being locked, the arms will be bent. So Jeremy will show us that bent arm planche, right? So the planche can be pretty good, but he's got the bent arms, as you can see right there. So this happens because for many people, it's a shortcut. It can feel like you're getting the planche sooner, right? And you're just kind of giving in. You're a little bit stronger maybe in this bent arm position, and you kind of keep that with your progressions of doing a tuck this way, a straddle this way, and so on. And you never really address this lock arm that you're supposed to have in the planche. So again, the best way to address it, strengthen the triceps, spend a lot more time in the lock arm position with the previous progressions, and continue building up to the appropriate planche for you. And again, just attention to detail. If that bent arm is there at the beginning and you carry on, it's never going to go away. So you really have to pay attention to it, address it right from the start, and keep it there. So bent arms in a planche is a common fault, so make sure that's not you. The last common fault that we see, neglect the core. And what I mean by that is more of the back and the glutes. So we often get so caught up in just training the shoulders and the rest of the upper body in the planche, and we're neglecting the lower half. So that's a big fault, to ignore the core. So we'll show you a couple exercises to how to correct it that will just address it right on its own. So Jeremy is just laying on top of an elevated surface. He does not need to be holding this bar, but this is a really good setup if you have it. So we can be doing different things like raising up into a straddle position or a straight body position, really any kind of planche that you're training, right? So he can be doing holds or lifts, and he's just mimicking the lower body progressions of a planche that we have in one of our other videos. And this has nothing to do with the pushing strength of the upper body, but purely the back extensors and the glutes that are involved with the planche. So this is a great setup. You could always do it just hugging bench or a box. So don't ignore the core, because you need this in the planche. So that concludes our video on common errors and faults that people make when training the planche. So make sure that you're spending enough time on their attention when training the planche. Make sure that you're paying attention to your hand placement. The shoulders, instead of being retracted, you want them protracted. The correct technique, going back as far as maybe a plank position or any planche progression that you're working on. Make sure the technique is right there in the positions. Training with bent arms is the other big fault, so make sure it's locked. And then lastly, don't ignore the core. Don't ignore the lower back and the glutes for your planche training. So thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned enough to help improve your planche and show us what it looks like sometimes. Hey movement athletes, real quick, if you want to get better with your calisthenics and bodyweight training exercises, we have an amazing free course on planches as well as other bodyweight training exercises. And this guide has the best tips, tricks, mistakes that you want to avoid, progressions, and more. So make sure that you subscribe to our channel, like, comment, hit the bell for notifications, and make sure that you share with others. We want to make sure that we know what you want to see from us, engage with us, comment, hear about your updates. But enjoy the free course, and thank you guys.